Sadie Sink's story does not begin on a red carpet or under blinding Hollywood lights. It begins in quiet rooms filled with discipline, uncertainty, and a belief that felt fragile but unbreakable. A belief that talent means nothing without courage. And courage is built when you keep showing up even when no one is watching, because before the world knew her name, Sadie was just a young girl learning how to stand tall in rooms that felt too big for her dreams. Growing up in a family where support mattered more than fame and effort mattered more than applause. And from a very early age, she understood something many people take a lifetime to learn, that success is not a moment, it is a habit repeated daily. And while other children were playing safely inside their comfort zones, Sadie was stepping onto stages, memorizing lines, facing rejection, and learning how to hear no without letting it define her worth, because rejection did not scare her, staying average did. And that quiet fear of being ordinary became the fire that pushed her forward even when the path made no sense to others. And as she trained in theater and performance, she absorbed lessons that would later shape her entire career, lessons about patience, emotional control, resilience, and the ability to disappear into a character so completely that the audience forgets the actor exists at all. And this ability did not come from luck, it came from discipline, long rehearsals, uncomfortable auditions, and the willingness to be judged again and again without losing herself in the process. Because Sadie Sink did not chase fame, she chased mastery. And mastery always attracts attention whether you ask for it or not. When she stepped into larger opportunities, including Broadway, she was no longer just learning how to perform, she was learning how to survive pressure, how to stand next to experienced professionals without shrinking, how to speak with confidence even when fear whispered that she didn't belong there. And those moments shaped her into someone who could handle global attention later on without being consumed by it. Because by the time the world met her through massive platforms, she had already faced versions of fear that were far more personal and far more defining. And when Stranger Things entered her life, it wasn't just another role, it was a turning point that tested everything she had learned so far, emotionally, mentally, and creatively. Because playing a character like Max required more than acting skills, it required emotional honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to sit with pain instead of avoiding it. And Sadie did not perform sadness, she embodied it, and that is why audiences connected so deeply with her work. Because people don't connect to perfection, they connect to truth. And Sadie Sink made truth her signature without ever needing to shout for attention. As her popularity exploded, something interesting happened. Instead of becoming louder, she became more intentional. Instead of chasing every opportunity, she chose roles that meant something, stories that carried weight, characters that reflected complexity rather than stereotypes. And in an industry that often tries to define young actors before they define themselves, Sadie quietly resisted being boxed in, showing that strength does not always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks like saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. Sometimes it looks like choosing growth over comfort, and sometimes it looks like protecting your inner world even when the outer world demands access to it. And this mindset turned her into more than just a popular actress. It turned her into a symbol of modern resilience, especially for young people who feel pressure to grow up too fast, perform perfectly, and never fail publicly. Because Sadie's journey reminds us that growth is messy, confidence is built slowly, and real power comes from self-respect, not validation. Beyond the screen, Sadie Sink's influence deepened as she used her voice thoughtfully, speaking about values, boundaries, and purpose without turning her identity into a performance. And in doing so, she proved that inspiration does not require constant noise. Sometimes it requires consistency, authenticity, and the courage to stay grounded when the world tries to lift you too high too fast. And what makes her story so powerful is not just her success, but the way she carries it, with humility, awareness, and an understanding that fame is temporary, but character lasts forever. And this perspective continues to shape her choices, her performances, and the way people see her, not just as an actress, but as a role model who shows that you can be ambitious without losing your values, talented without being arrogant, and successful without becoming disconnected from who you truly are. And this is why Sadie Sink's journey is not just a celebrity story. It is a lesson in patience, courage, and quiet determination, a reminder that the most powerful transformations often happen silently long before the applause begins. Sadie Sink's evolution did not stop once the spotlight found her. Because for her, visibility was never the destination, growth was, and as the world watched her rise, she quietly stepped into a deeper understanding of what it means to be seen without losing control over how you are defined, a challenge many young stars struggle with, yet Sadie approached it with a level of maturity that felt almost rare, choosing awareness over impulsiveness, intention over reaction, and meaning over noise, and this mindset allowed her to navigate fame not as a sudden explosion, but as a steady expansion of responsibility, artistry, and self-awareness, because when millions begin to project expectations onto you, the real test is whether you absorb those expectations or whether you stay rooted in your own internal compass. And Sadie Sink consistently chose the latter, proving that inner clarity is the strongest form of protection in an industry built on constant scrutiny. As her performances grew more complex, so did her emotional depth, and audiences began to notice something subtle yet powerful about her work. The way she listened on screen, the way silence carried as much weight as dialogue, the way pain was portrayed not as spectacle, but as something human, something lived in, and this emotional intelligence did not come from technique alone. It came from empathy, observation, and the willingness to feel deeply without fear. Because great actors do not fake emotion, they allow themselves to experience it honestly and then share it with restraint. And Sadie's ability to do this made her performances resonate across generations, reaching not just fans of entertainment, but people who saw fragments of their own struggles reflected in her characters, and that kind of connection cannot be manufactured. It can only be earned. What separates Sadie Sink from many rising stars is not just her talent, but her discipline in choosing substance over spectacle, because she understands that longevity is built on trust. Trust between the actor and the audience, trust that every role will carry intention, care, and respect for the story being told. And in a world where attention spans are shrinking and trends change overnight, she plays the long game, investing in projects that challenge her emotionally and artistically rather than chasing instant validation. And this patience reflects a deeper philosophy that real success is not measured by how fast you rise, but by how well you sustain growth without losing direction. And this philosophy quietly shapes every decision she makes, even outside her work. Sadie Sink represents a new kind of influence, one rooted in authenticity rather than performance, where presence matters more than perfection, and where confidence comes from self-knowledge rather than external approval. And this influence speaks especially loudly to young people who feel overwhelmed by comparison culture, social media pressure, and unrealistic standards. Because Sadie's journey shows that you do not need to be loud to be powerful. You do not need to be everywhere to matter, and you do not need to fit into anyone else's narrative to succeed. You only need clarity, commitment, and the courage to grow at your own pace. Even when the world demands speed. There is also something quietly revolutionary about the way Sadie Sink embraces vulnerability, not as weakness but as strength, because vulnerability requires honesty, and honesty requires courage, especially in an industry that often rewards masks over truth. Yet she has never been afraid to explore difficult emotional spaces, to portray grief, fear, and inner conflict with dignity. And in doing so, she reminds audiences that emotions are not flaws to hide, they are experiences to understand, and this message resonates deeply in a time where many people feel pressured to appear strong while silently struggling. Because Sadie's work gives permission to feel, to pause, and to heal, all without ever needing to explain itself. As her career continues to unfold, what becomes increasingly clear is that Sadie Sink is not building a legacy based on hype, but on consistency, character, and craft. And legacies built this way endure far longer than trends, because they are rooted in values rather than visibility. And this is why her story continues to inspire, not because it is flawless, but because it is intentional, reminding us that success does not require abandoning who you are. it requires. Becoming more of it, step by step, role by role, choice by choice, even when no one is watching, because the strongest foundations are built quietly, long before the world starts paying attention. As Sadie Sink moved forward, something remarkable became increasingly visible, not just to critics but to anyone paying close attention. She was not merely growing older in the industry, she was growing wiser within it.